First Nations. I'd like to welcome up Chief Janice George from the Squamish Nation, who will share a traditional welcome with us.
Tinoya Vinciquatos, Eyes Chepximiya, Eyes Chepximiya, Eyes Chepximiya, Chepximiya Siyam Kushansna, Tanachin Plasnak is Kahomish Uchmeo, Anwanach is following. Good evening, everyone. I come here as a respectful person. I welcome you all to the Squamish territory, or this land where my ancestors walked. My family chieftainship comes from Sanok, which is today called Falls Creek. My ancestors were here before Vancouver was called Vancouver. And I'm very proud of that. He settled that land and made it possible for our family members to live on that land. Our ancestors lived on all parts of this land, and I'm going to go more into that story later on, but I just welcome the chance to talk to people about being in Squamish territory, in Musqueam territory, in Tsleil-Waututh territory. The way we walk on this land is as if our ancestors were still on this land. If our ancestors, they are still here teaching us. And I implore you, and I ask you to take a great opportunity to hear the words of those ancestors, because they're still here and they can still speak to you and show you how to take care of the land and take care of the water. So I just welcome you all here and hope you take that opportunity. Listen.
Thank you very much, Chief George. And as Chief George mentioned, we'll have the honor of hearing from her again later this evening. So hello, everyone. My name is Veronika, Bylicki, and I'm the co-founder and co-director of City Hive, which is a not-for-profit based here in Vancouver on a mission to transform the way that young people are engaged in shaping their cities, in decision-making, and in tackling complex urban challenges. As you know, the Women Deliver Global Conference is here in Vancouver this week. It's the world's biggest conference on gender equality and the health, rights, and well-being of girls and women. The City of Vancouver is presenting these Women Deliver satellite sessions at the Vancouver Public Library Central this week as a complement to the Women Deliver 2019 conference, with an aim to connect the local Vancouver audience to gender equity issues through free talks and workshops. All sessions are free to attend, but require registration in advance, and childcare is provided free of charge, and accessibility requirements are reflected at all the events, including sign language interpretation for the noon hour and evening sessions. Before we begin tonight's event, I have a few housekeeping notes. Please note that there are elevators just outside the room next to the escalators if you need to be going up or down, and to proceed to the reception afterwards. And washrooms are located down the hall if you turn left out of this theater. So tonight's event focuses on the role of women in resilience in relation to climate change and emergencies, and how women play an important role in the recovery and strengthening of our communities from disasters. In the face of massive, rapid change to our climate and environment, in the era of climate alarms and climate emergencies, well timed, in the era of existing and increasingly challenging threats like wildfires, flooding, sea level rise, in an era of having to adapt while we try to lessen the brunt of these impacts, resilience speaks to how we rise up and respond to these challenges of our time. Resilience speaks to how we come together and show up as individuals and as a community. And I don't know about you, but if there's one person more than anyone in the world that I'd want to be leading me in any emergency, it's my mom. I'd want it to be someone who can stay steady and calm, yet is assertive and knows just what to do, or if they don't know what to do, is masterfully tactful at delegating and loving at delegating, and knows how to support and lift others to rise to the challenge to support each other. I'd want it to be someone who can manage expectations, and someone who nurtures the best in me and in all of us, and shows us how we can best show up for one another. And maybe I can expand that idea of my mom to motherly figures in our lives, and women more broadly. And we know that women in general are disproportionately impacted in states of emergency and by climate change, and at the same time, women are undoubtedly central in our community's abilities to recover from disaster and tackle complex challenges. And so tonight, we're very lucky to have 4 women sharing their perspectives and stories of resilience and what it means to them. I'll be inviting each of these women to share their unique stories and perspectives of resilience with us. And after these women share their stories, we encourage you to stay with us for a reception up on the 9th floor, where you'll have an opportunity to discuss with our speakers, share your own story, and connect with everyone else who's attending tonight. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker tonight, Anthonia Ogundale. Anthonia is currently the Manager of Business Continuity, Emergency Planning, and Environmental Sustainability at Van City Credit Union. With over 15 years of emergency management experience, Anthonia has been a part of large-scale response efforts, such as community evacuations, to advancing planning for large-scale events such as the G8 or G20 in Toronto. In her present role, Anthonia's team divides focus between the organizational resilience of Van City through their business continuity program, and ensuring the organization remains in integrity with their environmental commitments through overseeing their GHG accounting processes and employee engagement. So join me in welcoming Anthonia.
Oh my goodness, thank you very much, and what a great room, what a great crowd. Thank you, everyone, and well, I'm extremely humbled to be a part of this panel. I thought a lot about what to talk about today, and you know, it drove me to a point of almost insanity of all the number of different things and experiences I've gone through, but I've shown great resilience, and I'm going to share a few stories with you along a common theme. So in my role at Van City as the Manager of Business Continuity, Emergency Planning, and Environmental Sustainability, I think truly the longest title in the organization, I ensure the operational resilience of the organization. You know, I come up with the plans, work with developing policies and procedures to make sure that we can recover our operations for our 520,000 plus members on the Lower Mainland. That means that I'm the dark cloud in every meeting and in every room, and sometimes people avoid eye contact at the kitchen. My team is the what if team. You almost always see the glass half empty all the time. So you really hope that the business unit can fill it all the way up. You know, you have a really new and exciting IT project to do. What if it breaks? You know, a service is being moved to a new location. Well, do you have a plan in place if you lose that site? So you can see that in that context, I have to look at a lot of loss, and I have to look at how we can be resilient. Also within my role, I also look at environmental sustainability, so not a small mandate at all when we start to think about the climate emergency that we're dealing with right now. So in my work, again, I'm really blessed to be able to contemplate this concept of resilience as we work towards building healthy communities. It's one of the mandates that I really want to strengthen and bring my team forward to in terms of expanding it towards community resilience, especially when I understand resilience to mean the capacity of individuals, communities, and institutions and businesses and systems that are within a city to survive, adapt, and grow no matter what kinds of chronic stresses and acute shocks that they might experience. But as I intersect in both of those different spaces, I wonder whether or not our policy frameworks, our planning methodologies, and rigid response mechanisms, and I'm talking about our incident command structures and such, can really support resilience within these the declared climate emergency and within our emergencies, and take into account the whole person. As a professional who thinks about resilience again on a daily basis, I know that our technical solutions can only take us so far. So what I've been really contemplating and pondering is that whole person approach, and considering how the execution of these plans and integrated planning methodologies can take an intersectional approach. And it's been interesting that I've managed to get through this process and think about it, actually, by framing the disasters through a concept of loss. In my career, outside of the strictly business environment and sitting behind a desk, I have experienced and been a part of the routine loss of homes due to flooding, or the routine loss of forest fires and people losing place, to having to support the repatriation of the Lebanese community back in 2006. And again, we look at the different policy and response measures, and I can't help but think continuously about the losses that have been experienced throughout all of those disasters, and how resilient those communities might be. And it's sobering when I can only begin to contemplate this from the extreme loss in my family, and I think about the loss of my mother. I think about what it feels to lose solid ground and to lose foundation, to have to redefine who you are, where you fit into this world and your new environment. And I layer that on top of the different disasters that I've responded to as a part of a business cycle. As the growing climate crisis occurs, and as we see the vulnerability of these communities, it's a budget line item. We plan our vacations around it. We even talk about the food that we're going to be eating during these responses. And I feel, in connecting through the loss of my mom and considering the loss of these communities, that there's a need to thread a deep, meaningful empathy through the plans that we develop and we deliver. And I think about how might this new approach, or taking a look at building an empathy, might be able to inform the empowering of communities that have these strong resources and the policy decisions by government to be able to support them to get through this. The other things I ask myself as well are, what are the systems that are in place that allow us to detach from this reality, that allow us to detach from these cycles of loss that are happening all the time, happening right now. And when we bring it out and we think about the climate emergency and we think about climate change, I know we talk a lot about sea level rise and grieving the hope for the future, our hope for our future and our children, and not being able to, have as many kids as we want, or the single detached home, or it's really smoky down here in Vancouver. But why are we not grieving the losses that are happening right now? And it's in that loss and in that grief that I think that we can start to look and consider the empathy that is needed in order to truly build resilience, in order to create long-lasting solutions. So, again, I look and I consider the different places that I've been in terms of emergency management and response. I'm going to tell just one quick story about my time when working in the province of Ontario, and it might actually contribute as to why I'm here now. Every year, there's spring flooding in the northern Indigenous community of Chepximiya. We're very familiar with it. I remember the first time I was there, I was responsible with supporting and bringing dog food, making sure dog food flew up there in order to support the dogs that were in the nation. And then there was great camaraderie. We know we talk about in emergency management how it builds resilience. We're working really close with people. We work really close with communities. And it was such a strong experience, and we learned, we ran exercise, we practiced, so we could actually do it better again. This has been happening actually throughout my career, and even as we look at the news now, there was an agreement signed between the provincial government and that First Nations community to consider even the relocation, and nothing has happened. And I wonder whether or not it's up to us as citizens, as people that live in Canada, to begin to empathize and understand this routine loss that is happening. I even sometimes mourn the fact that I'm an emergency management professional when we think about that there needs to be a full-time position to support the continued response and recovery of these spaces. This is not to say that there's not great strength in these communities that are formed and great bonds that are formed after these disasters. But I think that we might be able to contemplate a new way of engaging in community in advance of these disasters that builds those deeper relationships, and as well as demand for strong policy decisions, or even deeper conversations that might be able to build not only just the resilience of the people that are around me in our neighborhood, but also to be able to support communities in advance, knowing what they need and empowering them to be able to just be safe and not enter into the cycle. Sorry, there's a lot of notes here. So as I said, there's a lot that I really wanted to dive in today, but I did want to really land on that empathy piece. You know, I wanted to talk about, you know, what it means every day to walk around in a Black body and the resilience that I need to experience by the continuous microaggressions and what that might mean in a space of being an emergency manager. To being in a male-dominated industry and what it means to be sitting across with and around men who may not necessarily identify with my own experiences. But I felt through all of that, and through all those experiences, and through all the exercises, what I've learned the most is when we deeply and truly understand and are able to empathize with other people, we're able to build long-lasting solutions. So I'd like to just present this to everyone in the audience. I ask you to sit in the knowledge of what loss truly is and what it feels like. And think about the communities that are not actually, I mean, there are communities around the world that are dealing with sea level rise, but there are communities right now that are being displaced, their houses, homes are being impacted by forest fires. I ask you to think about the loss of someone needing to think about and grieve again the future, not in an esoteric concept of thinking about, oh, I wish I could have my single detached home, or that I wish there wasn't smoke here. But there are people right now that are talking about how they need to interact with their children and one another in light of these emergency realities. Because I believe through this, we can build the stronger and healthy communities, because I think it's truly in empathy we're able to build long-lasting resilience. Thank you. I know I had 10 minutes. That was a lot.
Thank you, Anthonia, for your story and for sharing what's required to understand loss in order to build empathy, to build resilience. Next, I'd like to introduce Dalia Gonzalez-Harney. Dalia holds an MBA from the University of Hertfordshire and a BBA from the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana. She is currently the Director of Ancillary Services at Camosun College. Previously, she held other administrative positions at the University of Victoria, Vancouver Island University, and in environmental organizations in Mexico. Born and raised in Mexico City, as a young girl, Dalia experienced the 1985 earthquake in Mexico City. She developed a keen interest in social and environmentally responsible organizations that have led to her involvement in sustainability projects through her career. Join me in welcoming Dalia.
Thank you very much. That'd be great if you can get some lights. Sorry, I'm very visual, so I really like pictures, so I brought a lot of pictures. Yeah, I'm very honored to be here, having this space to share and to encourage each other as community members is truly important, I believe. I've been a grateful visitor to Vancouver Island for 15 years now. I call home Victoria. Victoria and Nanaimo have been my home for the last 15 years, but I was born and raised in Mexico City. And as you probably all know, it's one of the biggest cities in the world. At this point, we have 20 million people, over 20 million people, but back then it was 18 million people. It's a vibrant city, but a city that has seen a lot of pain over the years. As I was saying, was when I was 9 years old, a very massive earthquake hit the city, and that has changed my life. It has really shaped who I am in many ways, I think. But in the positive side of things, I think it gave me the experience to see how a whole country can come together and show solidarity. So September 1985, at 7 in the morning, an 8.1 magnitude earthquake hit the city. One of the worst earthquakes to hit the region. That's in my grandmother's neighborhood. 36 hours later, the aftershock of another 7.1 earthquake followed. And it was devastating. And at my age, as for a young kid, it's hard to understand what was happening. To this day, the death toll ranges, it hasn't been official yet, and I don't think it will ever be, ranges from 7,000 to 30,000 people dead, over 30,000 people injured, 400 buildings collapsed, 3,000 more had to be demolished, and 100,000 buildings were seriously damaged. The city was a chaos. It was, the government was completely overwhelmed and absolutely unprepared for such a disaster. However, I do remember feeling this chaos and this confusion, but also feeling the support and embrace from the community. Because hours after that happened, people started to go out the streets to volunteer and to help out, and they started to form groups. It was incredible how, with no organization, with no government support, there were groups that would start digging people out, finding supplies, providing food and shelter for the displaced, even making chains to remove debris. It was incredible. And I think the most difficult part for some of those groups was to try to connect families, because obviously there was a lot of people that it was not possible to identify. So I cannot imagine their experience. For my family, we were very fortunate that we didn't lose anybody, but nevertheless, we had a really different experience, because half of our relatives were displaced. So we all have to share houses and learn how to live together with no water, no running water for almost a year. We didn't have also school buildings. I remember for a whole year having to find different places to hold classes in. And it was interesting, because I think teachers and parents were saying that, yeah, we need to go back to teaching kids, but I think it was more that they wanted to be together. They were looking for those spaces to share. I'm gonna say that at an institutional level, I see how things changed drastically. All of a sudden, we started to see a lot of governmental programs in terms of emergency preparedness and response, which was very robust, and they had to deal with the aftermath, but also I think they had to accept that they had to be prepared for the future, as Mexico City is in that zone that gets a lot of earthquakes. So we had really strong earthquake drills. We all grew up doing these earthquakes at schools, and we really had it ingrained in our brains. I think it's muscle memory, because it's a very early stages for kids. They learn how to do it. And these programs, the drills, have been all around the country, even especially on that day, September 19th, is a national day of an earthquake. Ironically, on that exact day, September 19, 2017, so 2 years ago, just a few hours after they had done this national earthquake, another earthquake hit the city. 7.1 magnitude this time, but this time, only 400 people died. And 40 buildings collapsed, and it was a tragedy, but many, many lives were saved. And I saw the community coming back together again. I was not there in Mexico, obviously I was living here. And even though I was removed physically from that experience, I went through the experience of trying to locate my family for a couple of days. And I could see through social media, again, the community coming together and helping out. And through social media, this creativity that Mexicans have, finding a way to help out was incredible. And I can feel the strength rising up again in them. So I think there's a lot of experiences that teaches us how to deal with disasters. And as I was trying to reflect on what are the key elements that are really helping that community to be strong, the first thing I thought was, well, those programs that we used to be annoyed at when the government was rolling out, they actually help. So the government was, I mean, it's not perfect, I'm not saying that, and there's a lot of holes, and there's a lot of challenges for Mexico and Mexico City, but they did roll out incredible preparedness programs, trying to reach out all levels of communities, even campaigns for adults, campaigns for kids, and even in marginalized areas where people cannot read, they were also finding a way to communicate with them. So that's the number one that I think is key for being able to have the strength to deal with problems. Number two, for me, that was critical as well, seeing how communities were helping each other to cope and creating those spaces for emotional and spiritual support is critical. I think especially when we're facing the loss, it's so important that we can help each other and even if we don't have answers, to try to look for them because that helps our souls. This photo over here really broke my heart because as this is a soldier that couldn't save some people and he just broke down. For a soldier in Mexico, macho man, doing that is incredible, but also seeing how the other guys were helping him and embracing him, that's what we all need for healing, and I think that's critical as well. And now I have to say, I think that's something very particular to Mexico. Our humor, our creativity, and the way of that festive spirit that we have, I think that really helps us to go through challenges. So this is, I don't know who came up with this idea, but these were supplies for shelters for the kids. So they said, okay, let's tell them that it's Batman that is doing that to bring some joy. And somebody found a car and brought it to the shelter. They did it, and does that help saving somebody? I think it's saving some souls and some childhood. So I think that's so important to, even if we cannot find that joy, find our ways to create joy. And that's something that is it's a gift, I think. This is another example as well. Some medical students trying to help out kids and just dressing up so that it's a way to connect with them. And of course, music. Mexicans are always going to have music, so they would bring mariachis to the shelters and they would sing songs when they found somebody alive. That was so important to be able to keep that spirit up. And then another key element to me that's critical is everybody participating, regardless of gender, of age, of abilities. Absolutely everybody had a role to play. I think that's incredible. Because when we rely on somebody else, thinking that it's not our role to do it, I think we're losing something. We're losing the power of unity. We're losing the power of synergy, of creating more for ourselves and for the community. In my faith, we're taught that we're like one body, and all of us is a different area of the body, but we all need each other, and we all have a different purpose. And I think Mexicans got that with the earthquakes. They really display the concept that they understand that everybody's needed. And when I think about everyone, I also reflected on the role of women and how we are actually the glue that can help support those communities to go through all those stages. We have that nature that is very nurturing, that we're trying to care for everybody. And as I was reflecting on this as well, I was thinking about my grandmother and how she kept us grounded through the 1985 earthquake. She actually ended up coming and living with us, thankfully, and for a whole year. And I saw how she would take care of the plants, that if she didn't have a house, she still had a plant. And that was her joy, and how she could share her love through everything she did, and how she taught us to keep going and to keep finding love. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dalia, for sharing your story. I would now like to introduce Vivienne Antoine from the Bonaparte Indian Band near Cache Creek. Vi has been working as the recovery manager for the disaster program, and you'll be hearing more about her story there. Please join me in welcoming Vi.
Oh my goodness, you guys sound so much louder. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief George, for Nation Stick Towers community member to your area. It's very, very welcome. I appreciate the opportunity. I am the recovery manager for the Stick Towers First Nation, the Bonaparte Indian Band, 3 miles north of Cache Creek. We've been in the newspapers probably every year for the last 4 or 5 years. Cache Creek's been flooded 4 times. Our community has reached out and offered our assistance to those community members that were evacuated as a result of their homes being flooded. We supported them through their disasters, and they had to unfortunately evacuate during our disaster. But 2017 Elephant Hill wildfire that came from the Ashcroft community streamed across the interior very quickly and straight north to our area, which is 3 miles north of Cache Creek, that has 80 homes in the communities. Our reservists broke down to 9 designated reserve lands, 3 of which are occupied with community members aging. 80% are elderly, and very limited economy in our community. We live totally off the land that we survive off of. We pay our forage for our animals. We pick our berries from our mountains, our forests. We fish out of our streams, and we gather wood for our heat all summer for the winter months. In that one sweep of a day, the Elephant Hill wildfire took all that away. Our community members were completely evacuated within the 20 minutes that we had available to leave, and in that 20 minutes, 12 of us stayed behind and said that we would protect what we could and work with what we had. We ended up with a 1-inch garden hose and a couple of shovels and some axes, and we did a berm, they call a fire guard, a small quick fire guard, and then connected a 1-inch hose to the first home that we could locate, and we turned the hose on and dug a good guard for about 20 feet, 50 feet, and Mother Nature, we were all very comfortable with the wind changes that were occurring, we all simultaneously looked at each other and said, it's 1:30. The wind's about to change. Everybody go north. So we went up from the original Highway 97. We went up to the original start where the fire was coming in and hit the highest point of our area to protect the grasslands in the north end of our community going east, so that we could restrain the fire from continuing north behind our community. What ended up ultimately happening is it backfired. It burnt back into itself and burnt itself out. But then it jumped, the wind carried strong enough and it jumped the highway and ended up what we know today as Prince George. So it traveled quite quickly after it crossed the highway. In that time, all our community members evacuated, except for the two of us. When the fire first came through, or was announced through social media, my mother and I were about ready to leave the community. In that duration of 5 minutes, we decided that we were going to stay. And my brothers, who collected very quickly, we all stood up while my mother stood on the side of the hill by her garden. And we asked her, what would you like to do, Mom? Would you like to leave or do you want to stay? While my brothers are loading my horses into a horse trailer, she's decided she's going to stay. So I advised my brothers, I have to move my horses to safer ground, so can you please help Mom? She's going to stay, we're going to have to put the fire out. So we went over the valley, over the mound a bit, and there was the rest of our community, and they all said, okay, Biden, stay behind, let's go help. And the 12 of us that stayed behind stayed for the remaining of the evacuation, and of that we lost 1 unit that was abandoned, and the other 80 homes stayed intact. We continued to maintain contact with our community and our family through social media. Chief Ryan Day of the time, he was the chief at the time, he came into the community, barged his way through the RCMP barriers and stayed with us. We've had a number of the RCMP that we grew up with in the community. They left the detachment stations in Kamloops and Chase and came back to their community where they went to school with us, and they stayed and guarded with us. The Cashmead Community Hall is not allowed to leave. The Cashmead Fire Hall is not allowed to leave the area. Came out and helped for about 5 minutes before they could go back and save the rest of their homes in their valley. And the wildfire, the Elephant Hill wildfire, the disaster that it left behind, with using the resources for warmth and food for the winter wasn't enough. It allowed the rodents of the area that lost their homes because of the wildfire into our homes for the 3 months that we were evacuated. The disaster they left behind was damaged electrical, insulation, septics, our bedding. They slept in our children's beds. They tore up our entire inside of our houses. We allowed some care and cleaning of the homes, so allowed when I say allowed, a lot of the senior women of the community will not allow anyone in to clean their home. They believe that's their duty and they will only do that. So we were gifted the permission to go in and help clean them and look at that, remove any of the damage that the rodents left behind. 2 years later, we're still in the process of that. We have no fire protection. We're still in the process of working with emergency management teams and provincial and federal governments to support us in that. We're currently, this morning, as I left Cashmead to come here, we're currently just working on the emergency management plan to begin building a fire hall, to begin putting fire stations in our other 2 communities that are separated from us, as well as rebuilding our fish hatchery that's been destroyed not only by winter, this February disaster that we had an extra large amount of ice all through and took away our complete fish hatchery. So now we have no spawning fish possibly this summer, which also the elephant wildfire, the forage and the vegetation that was left behind for the wildlife is gone, so we have no moose or deer to harvest our winter food. Our wild berries that we pick, our huckleberries, or bushel that we call, it's a soapberry that we use for medicinals, that's all gone as well. So we're very diligently, this year, building a lot of gardens. A lot of vegetable gardens in, we've got a lot of vegetable fruit trees being planted. We're helping each other that way. The ladies of the community have organized canning sessions for our community to begin rebuilding their pantries. Our homes, I'm currently working on renovating all 80 units from ground up. A lot of the homes will require lifting and cleaning, gutting right out and putting a foundation in. So it's like rebuilding a complete home, except that we're not allowed to rebuild a complete home. We have to renovate it. So wording from provincial and federal funding is very limited and very strict funding for renovations. So we have to work together as a community. So we've got red sealed carpenters and plumbers and electricians that will be volunteering their hours to help us to complete our units. Our next steps moving forward, our children are only allowed arm's length away from the parents during July and August. That's our hottest times of the year up there. So our wildfires are quite prominently started already in the area. So we're very cautious about letting the children out of our sight. The gathering of the communities are more organized and together. We've just had our first flash flood emergency warning just last couple weeks ago on the long weekend, and everybody was 1-800 numbers, social media, cell phones were charged and on alert, and our telephone homes, everybody stayed home that weekend and not left. That's the change that we're experiencing in our community. We're limiting our time away from our community. Our community members at the time of the evacuation, like I said, we had 8% elderly. They were spread out throughout to Prince George, to Hinton, Alberta, all the way down to Vancouver, without their family members. So they weren't in touch with anybody. They were totally felt like they were abandoned from the community. So today we work together, we stay together, we have a vacation together, we plan, our community members all plan their meetings at specific times of the year so that we're together. We try to maintain communication, even if it's not a quick hello anymore. It's, do you need anything? What do you want me to pick up for you while I'm in Kamloops? What do you want me to get while I'm in Vancouver? So those are extra band-aids that we can only do for each other for now. But when we advise people to reach out before they go to Kamloops to get groceries, we say it in a manner that will allow us to have a head count if there's an emergency, because we have to be aware of how many people are off the community as well as how many are in the community. And what a way to start a hello on a Sunday morning, right? I appreciate the opportunity that the communities of Cache Creek and Ashcroft have provided for us. I appreciate the arms that were sat at the table with us during the federal provincial discussions on how we're going to fund our recovery program and how we're going to plan and move forward from our recovery program. More importantly, I respect the women and the elderly women of our community for all that they've gone through because of what we've had to survive and how they insisted on participating in that change. The community together has a as one has become stronger, but two, our traditions will maintain. We just have to travel a little further, but we still maintain our traditional cycles. So our seasonal gathering still gets done. Our caring for fish is a priority this year, more important than any other year. And our youth of tomorrow get to hear the stories that we have survived because of the disasters, and they learn lessons from them. For this, we're very thankful, and I can't be more proud to be part of the panel that we have today. It's just amazing what the women have had to endure in their short time that they've been on this, on Mother Nature, Mother Earth, and it's just gratifying to be able to share that with a very attentive audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you for, I think you've had to travel the furthest out of anybody here today, so thank you for being here with us and sharing your story. Next up, I'd like to welcome back Chief Janice George. Chief Janice George is from the Squamish Nation and graduated from Capilano University in North Vancouver and the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She is an accomplished weaver and teacher from the Squamish Nation who co-founded the Lehen Out Weaving House to share the teachings and practice of traditional Coast Salish wool weaving. Chief Janice George is a hereditary chief, trained museum curator, and educator. She is from a prominent Squamish family and has numerous ceremonial and cultural responsibilities in her community. Please join me in welcoming Chief Janice George.
Thank you. What an honor it is to be here with these ladies, these strong-hearted ladies, strong mind, strong heart. It's really an honor. So I'm going to weave my story of resilience and the resilience of my people, and I'm going to weave you in tonight. So I was born a long, long time ago, 1957, and I have 5 sisters. And my father was a leader in the community. He was on chief and council. My mother was a teacher. She worked at our daycare on the reserve. And at times, I was told later, at times we had lost funding for our daycare on the reserve, and my mother still worked there. She still took care of the children every day, and because she loved them, and because it was needed in our community. So we got a lot of good teachings from them. Unfortunately, in 1981, on the Sea to Sky Highway, we lost 4 of our family members. My sister, who's here with us tonight with me, she is our gift. She survived that. And so it was so important that we learned, or that our parents gave us those teachings that gave us a foundation about how to be on the land, how to be with our ancestors, and how to be with our elders, and how to be with our children. We had those teachings. We were so fortunate in our life to have that passed on to us. And the teaching that went with that is to pass on what we know. So it was a really hard loss. It was very, very dark times, very dark times. But we were so fortunate because my mother's mother stepped up at that time. And she took me and my sisters, and she led us through that dark time with the beautiful, strong teachings of the Squamish people on how to survive a traumatic loss. We have ceremonies that will take us through that loss and help us survive that loss. We have ceremonies that will tell us what to do when we're in that deep, dark place, what we can do to survive that. So grateful to her for having that knowledge. So she was in her 90s at that time, and she just took us by the hand and she led us through. And when I speak, I would say the culture saved my life. And it indeed did save my life. Those teachings that she handed down to us, that she got from her mother and her grandmother, they saved my life and my sister's life. So I'm very, very thankful for that. And a lot of those teachings she gave about weaving, and when I started weaving, and she was like, oh, she looked at my work. She said, oh yeah, that's good. You have to teach whoever wants to learn. When somebody wants to learn from you, you teach them how to weave. So I took that teaching from her and took it as a responsibility. At the time, my husband and I started weaving. We learned how to weave in 2003. Vancouver had put in a bid for the Olympics, and the 2010 Olympics, and we won the 2010 Olympics to happen here. And of course, one of my first thoughts was, what are we gonna wear? What are we gonna wear? No, really, what are we gonna wear when the world comes to see the host nations and we don't have any weavers? How are we gonna represent ourselves to the world as the strong people that I know we are? We carry so many teachings about this land that we're walking on right now, but that's one thing we didn't have. So we went to learn. We went to learn so we could come back and teach. And we started teaching in 2004. We decided that we're going to teach the education departments. And they started teaching. And so since we started teaching in 2004, there was one weaver in the Squamish Nation, in my nation, the Squamish Nation. There was one weaver. And he wasn't that comfortable teaching. And that's okay. He was modeling good behavior. That was his job. That's okay. So we went out and started teaching. And I'm so proud to say that, we taught in our own nation, we taught other nations, Seychelles, Chepximiya Bay, just Lummi in Washington State, and many nations. And we've taught, and our students, over 3,000 people. And we know now that it's never going to be that we might lose our weaving skills in our nation. We'll never lose it again. And going from seeing no weavings being worn in our ceremonies, of people would wear Pendleton blankets or wrap babies in the beautiful geometric design blankets that are for sale now. And now at least 85% to 90% are woven. All our ceremonies, people are wearing their woven blankets, their woven robes that somebody in their family has made for them. That somebody in their family has lovingly made for them. And one of the teachings that my grandmother taught us about the weaving is that when you're a weaver, your job is to weave protection into that robe. Weave your love and your protection and your prayers and your good feelings into that robe, because when that person who wears it, they're going to feel that, and that's going to carry them through. So that's the weaver's job in the community. And that's the teaching that we pass on from our grandmother. And she gave us many other teachings about chiefs. She taught about chiefs, what chiefs do. And what happens when a chief passes away. When a chief passes away, there's going to be a big windstorm. So there's all of these different teachings that she gave us, and she gave us such a strong foundation to stand on. I stand on that foundation of the culture. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here. I don't think my sisters would be here either. We need it. And I think when we share it, we strengthen everybody. I think everybody has something that they can hold on to in their culture. And I think if you do that, it'll carry you through a lot. It's a good foundation to stand on for everybody. Everybody. So I saw a lot of resilience. She taught me about, the ancestors and how they lived through being discovered. How they lived through being discovered. How they lived through disease. How they lived through residential school. That's a lot of resilience. That's a lot of resilience that we carry, that we have. And I'm so proud of that. And even when I had the ladies weave, we had a monumental project, 10 feet weavings, and our weavers were weaving for 1 year. And they did it. People were calling us stubborn, but I was saying, no, that's tenacity. That's tenacity. So, yeah, so in my school and in my training, as in museum work, the other life I have, I was privileged enough to find out that we had some ancestors in Gatineau, in at that time Museum of Civilization, now Museum of, today it's the National Museum of History. So when I was there, I found out we had 2 ancestors there. I phoned home and I told our leadership at that time, there's 2 ancestors here, and they say they're 4,000 minimum years old, and they were taken from Stanley Park. So they said, you do what you have to do, you bring them home. So I started that repatriation process, having never been through that process, and our people hadn't been through that process yet either. So we started that. It was an amazing process, but it took a long time. When we went back to collect our ancestors after waiting, it was probably an 8-month process. We went to bring our ancestors home. We took a youth, we took an elder, we took our spiritual leaders, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go as well. And we brought we did ceremony for our ancestors. There was 2 of them, a man and a woman. And we knew they were high people because their foreheads were bound. And like the Egyptians, they were sloped. So we knew they were high people. So when we got into the airport here in Vancouver, we had a police escort. And our people came to greet our ancestors. And we took them through Stanley Park. And sorry. I always do this when I talk about it. so don't worry about me. I'm okay. We took them through Stanley Park, and it was an amazing thing to be able to do for them. Bring them to their home. Bring them to their home. And let them see their home again. And our elders told us to do every single ceremony that we had, so we did. And my grandmother was still here at the time, in her 90s. And I sat there with her, and we had prayers for them, and we were sitting together. And she said, I want to go see those ancestors. And so we went up there, and we were looking at the ancestors, her and I, my 90-something-year-old, 4-feet-something grandmother, and me looking at these over 4,000-year-old ancestors. And besides feeling like smaller than a speck of sand, I realized that those ancestors love me just as much as my grandmother did. And that's why we're here today, because of that resilience that we're weaving through these stories. I was so proud of them. I was so thankful to them for carrying that knowledge through all of that time, through all of those things they made it through. Those ancestors that, our elders and ancestors that went through that keyhole when we were tens of thousands big as the Squamish Nation. We went down to 200 people. And they went through that keyhole carrying all of this knowledge and all of this strength and all of this foundation, all of this culture and all of our traditions, and they came and they brought it back to us. So it's kind of a responsibility now to carry on the teachings. For all of us, we all have teachings in our culture. I encourage you to pass on yours to your next generations. So I just want to thank you all for coming here. It's been an honor to share with you the story of resilience along with these amazing women. It's really been an honor. Thank you so much. Siyam.
Thank you, Chief Janice, and thank you to the three of you as well, Anthonia, Hive, and Dalia, for sharing your stories. I'm feeling so honored to be hearing stories of the role of our matriarchs, of our mothers, our grandmothers, and in passing on teachings, stories of understanding loss and building empathy, which builds resilience, how our communities respond to shock, and also how our communities, and in particular Indigenous communities, have to rise up to be able to support themselves and really rise up to the challenge of responding to shocks. And also in the role of carrying on tradition and learning from our matriarchs as well. And I think part of what I was hoping to do in close now is to weave some of the themes from this evening, but Chief Janice, you are the master weaver, and you've already done that really beautifully. But I was hoping to share some reflections now, and I think being a young woman in Vancouver, working in this space too, of themes of resilience and what's happening right now here in Vancouver and around the world. And I think one of the themes that really resonated for me was the importance of, as we talk about resilience, looking back. And I think that there's that expression that as you row forward, you're actually facing backwards, and it depends which boat you're in. But that idea of, as we go forward, it's looking back and learning from both our elders and also from past experiences and shocks and stresses, and building that foundation as we talk about resilience. Another theme that I think feels really emergent right now is the idea of hope. And I think as we feel the simultaneous weight and opportunity of our present challenges, to me, hope in action is resilience. And I think particular right now, something that's standing out for me is the youth climate strikes. And I think in its very nature, the climate strikes and youth deciding to not sit in their classrooms, but having to leave school in order to take action, to raise ambition, is powerful. But what makes this movement incredibly powerful to me is what they're doing differently. And to me, what they're doing differently is recognizing that it isn't just a strike for climate, but that we also need to be talking about decolonization, equity, reconciliation, and that in itself is what builds resilience. They're recognizing the power in unity over divisiveness, and that reimagining a future where we tackle climate and our communities are truly resilient is synonymous with one that is more just and more equitable, and where everyone has equal opportunity to thrive. One other element that's so powerful and hopeful, and what I think I heard much of in the stories tonight, which I'm also seeing in particular in youth mobilizing in different places around the world, is that the way in which they're organizing is building resilience. It's networked, it's recognizing the importance of relationships, it's recognizing that we need to build allyship, and it's recognizing in particular that through amplifying voices that are typically excluded from decision making, we're actually building resilience in the process. And I think that ties into a theme today of hearing from women who are front and center when we talk about resilience and in building resilience, that it's the very act of elevating women's voices that also builds resilience. Women often play a role behind the scenes in keeping our communities strong and healthy, often through unpaid and unrecognized labor, whether it's raising children, serving on the pack, bringing our communities together in times of shock, and doing additional emotional labor. And women are often disproportionately impacted in those states of emergency, as we've heard. And as we talk about resilience, we need to be recentering and amplifying the voices of these women. And through doing that, we also inherently build stronger communities. And a final theme that I think I heard much of this evening is recognizing our own power. And part of that to me is recognizing our own agency in response to challenges. And part of that's also showing up for each other, allowing each other to grieve, and building empathy. And I think that also comes with being our best selves by supporting each other and collectively through doing that, building more resilient communities. And so with that, another huge thank you to Anthonia, Vi, Dalia, and Chief Janice for sharing your stories. If you could please join me in a round of applause for these women. And we are all very lucky. They will all be moving upstairs with us to the reception area, and we'd be happy to talk to anyone, so please join us there for light snacks and refreshments. And a few final things before we head upstairs as well, is that it's important for all of us to make space for women's voices to be heard in building a resilient community. And so to keep sharing stories, we'd like to introduce you to Yute Lee, our event videographer today, who will also be moving upstairs, and he would love to capture more stories on resilience from anyone who would like to share. He'll be set up outside on the patio, outside on the patio upstairs, so please go and visit him if you'd like to share your story of resilience. There's also an opportunity, if you aren't comfortable speaking in front of the camera, to write down your story of resilience, or tell us what resilience means to you. So you can see our amazing volunteer Jessica, who will be upstairs, as well as the photographer Ida at the table in the reception room. As well, just outside as you exit, you'll see that there's an exhibit called Women Deliver Cities by Germaine Co. And it'll be on until the end of June, so you can catch it today or come back another day, or catch another one of them that's happening this week to see that. And lastly, in the spirit of resilience and building connections, before you head upstairs, I have one ask for you. And I invite you that as you stand up, to turn to the person next to you and share what's something that stood out for you today, or what's your own story of resilience. So please join us upstairs, and a reminder that there are elevators just outside on the right. And lastly, thank you for joining us tonight.